Hey everyone! Welcome to Literary Ramblings. We are your hosts. I'm Corrie,
And I'm Charlotte.
and we like to ramble about literature. We were trying to think of something to talk about at the beginning of the podcast, even though it irritates me to listen to people talk about random crap before podcasts, because I'd rather they just get to like whatever they're supposed to talk about. But everybody does it, so I suppose it's got to be effective in some way, right? So Charlotte wants to talk about the Olympics that I don't ever watch.
Corey is somehow totally uninterested in the Olympics, even though,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. I I don't know if I'm fully in the camp of that online meme that's like a regular person should compete in the Olympics so everyone can see how good Olympians actually are. But I do feel like you sometimes lack context for what they're doing. Like as a viewer, you're just like, this looks cool, and I'm sure it's much harder than it looks, but I can't even fully appreciate it because I don't know, you know?
Yeah, and I don't care either. I'm sorry. Just like I know that it's a really big thing and like I'm not one of those people who's like I don't care so it's stupid and we shouldn't even have it. Like I'm not one of those people. Like yeah, have the
Mhm.
Olympics. I think it's cool. But I also don't really care about it at all. I never watch anything in the Olympics. A couple of my friends will watch a few things. One of my friends likes curling, so that's Winter
Mhm.
Olympics. And I'm like, that sounds like the most boring thing to watch ever. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like sweeping my house is more interesting than watching somebody like sweep ice.
I can agree with that. I really prefer like gymnastics, diving, synchronized swimming, like
Hmm.
just seeing the cool,
Yeah.
graceful ways
That's
that people can move.
yeah, and that's a sport where somebody might like actually die.
That is not okay. All right, maybe that is part of the attraction,
It's
but
higher stakes.
it is. It's
I mean,
higher
they do have
stakes.
lifeguards at the Olympics, so
Yeah, and like
I hope
the
it
horse
dies.
jumping and stuff is cool too.
Oh yeah, I forget that horses are part of the Olympics sometimes because
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah. I was gonna say, well, if you don't watch, then it's kind of like why would you know that? But
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just glad that they added rock climbing as a, geology minor as we discussed last time. I'm
Hmm.
pleased that rocks are being brought into the Olympics.
Yes.
Although only artificial ones, which is sad, but
Yeah.
got to control the course conditions, I guess.
I suppose. I don't like. I feel like the true Olympics should be like the Hunger Games.
I mean, how much cooler would it be if they were on Mount Fuji and they were rock climbing Mount Fuji as part of the
Yeah,
Olympics?
that would be kind of cool. You would not be able to have it like be even though, unless you allowed each competitor to go like one at a time. It wouldn't be like a
Yeah,
race to the top. They would have to
that'd be
figure
the
out
same
another way to
route.
judge it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are our thoughts on the Olympics.
Yep. Not that anybody asked.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're gonna talk about The Gentleman of the Road. It's by
Yeah,
Michael. I didn't look up how to pronounce his name. I'm gonna say Chabon.
Shaban. I like
Yeah, I
it.
like that. I like the way to say that. And it was Charlotte's pick
Yes.
for this month. So that's what we read. So Charlotte gets to tell us about this book.
Yeah, so I actually didn't write a summary this time, but it kind of works
Oh.
out because even just reading you the summary from inside the book, you kind of get a sense for how he writes, which
Hmm.
is pretty drastically different from a lot of stuff we've been reading lately. So here's that summary. They're an odd pair, to be sure. Pale, rail-thin, black-clad Zelikman, a moody, itinerant physician fond of jaunty headgear, and an ex-soldier, Amram, a gray-haired giant of a man as quick with a razor-tongued witticism as he is with a sharpened battle-axe. Brothers under the skin, comrades in arms, they make their rootless way through the Caucasus Mountains circa AD 950, living as they please and surviving however they can, as blades and thieves for hire and as practiced bamboozlers, cheerfully separating the gullible from their money. No strangers to tight scrapes and close shaves, they've left many a fish shaking in their dust, tasted their share of enemy steel, and made good any number of hasty exits under hostile circumstances, none of which has necessarily prepared them to be dragooned into service as escorts and defenders to a prince of the Khazar Empire, usurped by his brutal uncle, the callow and decidedly ill-tempered young royal, burns to reclaim his rightful throne, but doing so will demand wicked, cunning, outrageous daring, and foolhardy bravado, not to mention an army. Zelicmen and Amram can at least supply the former. But are these gentlemen of the road prepared to become generals in a full-scale revolution? The only certainty is that getting there, along a path paved with warriors and whores, evil emperors, and extraordinary elephants, secrets, world swordplay, and such stuff as the grandest adventures are made of, will be much more than half the fun.
I don't usually read the summaries. I mean, last time I did because I didn't write a summary myself. But that makes this book sound way more exciting than I feel like it was.
What?
Yeah, I didn't feel like this book was that exciting.
What? All right. Well,
I'm sorry.
I think you can get a sense of how he uses run-on sentences, though.
Oh my gosh, they never stop. It's like reading a Pauline epistle in the Bible. Paul also speaks in run-on sentences almost constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you're like, how many sentences, how many periods are on this page? Oh, 2? Okay.
On this whole page? Great. Yeah. I found myself rereading sentences several times, which is kind of rare because normally I personally am also a fan of run-on sentences. Yeah. But I try to be reasonable about it,
Yeah. They're very, people who write in run-on sentences tend to be a little more poetic. Mm-hmm. And that's why they end up way more poetic, is because they just like to give you a good feel of the whole thing in one breath.
Yeah. They go with the flow.
Yeah.
Occasionally you do need to break up that flow for clarity.
Yes. So I gave this book 3 stars, which is my very standard rating. If I neither hate nor love a book, I will give it 3 stars. Basically, that's just where every book starts for me. So it didn't really super impress me, but I didn't hate it either. So that's what I gave it. 3 out of 5 stars.
I gave it 3.5. Okay. I enjoyed it, and I liked the change in wording. I felt like he has a good grasp of language, and it felt like he's just playing with the words sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed that. So, but the plot was rather convoluted and required you to keep track of a lot of names of things. Yes. Which got confusing at points.
And part of why it's confusing is because there's so many run-on sentences and because it's so poetic.
Yeah.
There's this one thing, I write all my reviews for Goodreads and Amazon, so those are up, and they'll be linked in the description. But something that I mentioned in my review is how he does this thing where he constantly refers to people as either like a character trait or an ethnicity of some kind. Mm-hmm. And that got kind of old by the end of the whole book, because by that point it was confusing. There's more than one time where he introduces a new character with a scene where there's a character that we've already met before, but he acts like it's somebody that we haven't. Yeah. And then you're like 3/4 of the way through the scene and you're like, oh, I actually know this person. And then he switches to the name. So, I mean, I'm okay with that kind of thing happening. Mm-hmm. It's cool for me. I think it's fun to do that, both as a reader and a writer occasionally, but he does it a lot.
Yeah, I would say it does add to making the story feel older as historical fiction, because that is kind of a thing of older authors. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was definitely, there were times where I was like, do we know this person, or who is this? And also the ethnicities and stuff that he's using are old terms that no one uses anymore. So that also makes it tricky, because sometimes you're like, what does this even mean?
Yeah.
Like the main characters are Amram and Zelicmen. And Zelicmen is a Frank, which basically in my head I just translated to German, but I don't know how accurate that really is.
Did Germany exist in 950 AD?
No, it didn't. That's why, but I think it's in the area where Germany later is.
Okay. I basically translated it to European.
Oh.
Like he's gonna be white and blonde.
Yeah. Or maybe actually
he is. That's how he's described.
It's probably French. That's right.
He never speaks French.
Franco-German, you know.
He
doesn't
speaks
speak
like
French.
5 languages.
I know, but he doesn't speak French because he's a Jew, so he grew up speaking
Hebrew?
Hebrew. Yep.
Makes sense.
But
see,
yeah,
there's some confusion.
yeah,
Like,
so that's what I'm saying. Like, using these antiquated terms is also like, unless you really want to Google it and be like, this is exactly where he's probably from, you gotta let it go.
yeah, I let it go a lot.
So yeah, but basically Amram and Seligman, do we even find out exactly how they met? Or do we not? I don't think we do.
Everything's so fanciful and like run-on sentency that sometimes I can't tell the difference between when they're talking about the past and when they're talking about the present. So like I know that we got like a little backstory on both of them, but like I really have no idea.
Corey, I'm beginning to speculate that you don't have the strongest grasp on time in general, so
not in literature. I mentioned this quite a bit.
yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because I like my brain just doesn't care or what. But I tend to do that. I do tend to do this a lot where I don't really understand timelines in books very often, and I think that's why I hate writing things that take place over long periods of time. Because I'm like, how long is this supposed to take? And I'm like, well, it just skipped 3 days. It's fine.
It works out.
It's cool. But also, it is. I mean, it's hard because it's historical fiction, and then it's also when they're talking about backstory, it's not like enough of the language changes or enough of the setting changes.
Yeah.
That I like would pick up on it.
Yeah. Well, basically, they're kind of an unlikely pair, is how I would characterize them, because Amram is from Africa, and he's like this giant hulking guy who carries an axe as his weapon of choice. Mm-hmm. And then Seligman is a Frank who carries basically a rapier, I think.
Yeah, it's really skinny. They make a point of saying that it's very skinny.
Like, no one believes he can kill stuff with it.
Yeah, there's illustrations in this book.
Yeah, which I loved.
I loved it too.
But yeah, his sword's called Lancet. Mm-hmm. Basically, it is kind of cool. His backstory is that he was trained as a surgeon and always kind of frustrated that Jewish people weren't allowed to be armed. And so he keeps this kind of ridiculously skinny rapier as like an intentional choice that it's similar to like a surgical knife in a way.
Yeah. So he has plausible deniability.
Yeah.
If anybody says like, "Oh, you're not allowed to have a weapon," and he's like, "It's not a weapon.
Mm-hmm. It's for doing surgery."
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, and I think I really liked both of them.
Yeah.
They stood out from each other, different opinions. Amram is much more stable and I would say a bit more loyal, I guess.
Well, Seligman is like constantly depressed. They call it, he goes through like melancholy, where he like tries to commit suicide every once in a while.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, spoiler warning for the rest of this podcast.
I don't know, is that a spoiler?
It's not a spoiler warning because he doesn't, but I mean, we're probably going to start talking about the plot and stuff now, so there's your official spoiler warning.
Yes. Well, I mean, Seligman's family was basically killed, all except his father, I think.
I don't remember.
And he was unable to protect them due to the whole Jewish people not being armed.
Yeah.
And he was young when it happened. So he basically just has Amram and then his horse, Hillel, who I loved his horse as well.
Yes, his horse is great.
Yeah, a bit of a plot device, kind of, but I think that's allowed. That's fair. Like, horses used to be like that in the olden times. They were very important to your way of living. Yeah, Hillel is just very well trained and comes to their rescue numerous times.
Yeah, he does. They go after Hillel a couple times too.
Yeah, Yeah, people try to steal them. Horse thieves are everywhere, apparently.
They are. Well, they are gentlemen of the road, which
Yes.
is a nice way to put ruffians and mercenaries.
Highwaymen. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in case you can't tell, this takes place in kind of the Middle East, actually.
Yeah.
Um,
Give or take. I looked up exactly like some of the places that they were referencing,
hmm
but it is essentially just next door to the Middle East.
Yeah.
So, which is great. I don't know how much. I mean, I guess you were more excited about the things that happen in this book. I didn't feel like there was a lot of plot,
Mm.
but maybe some of that is also because I didn't understand any of the politics going on. And
And the
also
politics
when,
were the plot.
yeah, so I was like, I mean, some of it is explained. I got the gist of it. But
hmm
then at the same time, what something that irritated me is there during the action scenes, it's really I found it somewhat confusing. And it was confusing because of the run-on sentences and the very poetic and old language.
hmm
That sometimes I was like, I do not understand what just happened. Like,
Mm.
I don't understand what physically transpired. Not that, like, I don't understand, like, there's emotions running high and there's lots of tension, but I
Mhm.
literally do not understand who moved where and what, like, stabbed who. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know what happened, but I guess
Which
we're here now.
is, yeah, that's a pretty major problem.
Did you have any trouble with stuff like that? Because there
I
were
did.
a couple of scenes. There's one in kind of the middle of the book
Mm-hmm.
that I found really confusing, and I just sort of like was like, okay, fine, whatever. I don't like it's fine. And then towards the end, when you switch perspectives to like a random soldier guy,
Yeah, the captain of the archers.
yeah, and I was like, I don't even really know who this is.
Well, we had never met him before, so that's
Yeah, and then we spend like an entire chapter just like in his perspective, and I was like, I don't even understand if he's like actually dying right now or not.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
he doesn't even know like anybody's names and stuff.
Nope.
So like he just it's another one of those times where you just get like a descriptor for characters, which when you're moving quickly in an action scene, it's much easier to understand if you just use people's names.
Yeah, yeah. Because otherwise, you have to keep track of who physically each person is by what they look like, and that is just hard to do.
Yeah, because some of the characters look similar, and then there's the whole using an ethnicity or a descriptor for characters that we know already. That's a
Yeah.
habit throughout, but it's never like the same one. Because Zelikman pretends to be other people sometimes.
He does.
But then, like, when you find out that it's really Zelikman, the other character that you're still in their perspective, sometimes they'll continue to refer to them.
But I hit that. The
Yeah,
good.
by the other one. And I'm just like, this is like really weirdly confusing. And I think by the end, it all just came to a head that I was like, I have no idea who's doing what anymore because a lot of the same characters like all come together in one spot. And I'm like, I could barely tell you apart when there were only 4 of you in one scene, and now there's like 8.
Yeah, it definitely took work to figure out this book, I would say. But basically, at the beginning, you're at a tavern in kind of the middle of nowhere,
Hmm.
and this Mahout, is that how you say that? Uh,
Yeah, that's how I said it.
a keeper of the elephants finds Amram and Zelikman. He figures out that they kind of like duped everyone in the bar, and so at first they're like, "Oh man, now we got to kill you. You figured us out." But then he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh no, I actually want your help. I have this kid with me, and his family basically used to rule this one area, and this other guy, Buljan, overthrew his family and killed like everyone, and he's trying to help this kid get to his other relatives before being murdered by the people following them, basically."
Yeah.
And the kid is not named for a long time. He just goes
Yeah.
by Stripling.
I thought it was Stripling. I didn't look it up.
There's no E in it.
Yeah, but it has the ing on the end.
Yeah, but it's spelled Stripling.
Yeah. I know how it's spelled.
I don't know. I just went off how no one says this word out loud. This is a problem in this book.
Oh, you're right.
Is it
I
Stripling?
just looked it up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ha. So that one I did
Okay.
pronounce right.
Uh,
Uh,
through no fault of your own.
no. Well, yeah. That was just luck. But
Yeah.
later you find out that his name is Falak. No, wait, how were you saying it? Is that how you were saying it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that works for me. I'm pretty sure that I pronounced a lot of things differently every time I read them. You just cut out for like a good 40 seconds.
Oh, did I? Do you remember the last thing you heard?
We were talking about pronunciations and how I pronounce everything differently every time I read it.
Hmm. Well, that's disappointing.
Why? What did you say?
I went on to talk about Falak and
Yeah.
yeah, just basically how he isn't happy that the Mahout helped him out of there.
Yeah, because he'd rather have died fighting.
Yes.
He'd rather have literally just like essentially committed suicide by trying to fight off an entire army by himself
Hmm.
than to just have the audacity of someone to save his life and take him to a competent relative.
Yep.
But that doesn't work out very well because they get to the competent relative and the competent relative's dead.
Yep. So Amram and Zelikman actually are really reluctant to do the whole job, but then they promise him a lot of money, and then like immediately the Mahout gets shot and dies, and they just have to like take off.
Yeah, and then the Phelock just literally just hops on along for the ride.
Yeah, and but keeps trying to flee like all the time.
Yeah, which is, whatever.
Yeah. So
They're just very
Zelikman's
determined.
basically my comment about loyalty earlier is because Zelikman basically is like just let the kid go, like they
Who
don't want this to
cares?
happen. Yeah. And then Amram is more like, no, Buljan did a really evil thing, and you know, it's his rightful kingdom. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and there's some stuff like they explain like that the Phelock would be like in charge of like an area, but then he would answer to a different guy. I
you're
don't
talking
know
about
how
their
to
political
describe
system.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would
So
it be
basically,
kind of like the president and then like a governor
uh,
in like
no,
a really really not correct way at all?
yeah, no. So the Beck, the position is called Beck that Philak's father had, and that
Okay.
Buljan stole, which is the war king of the Khazars, and the Kagan,
Sure.
sure. The Kagan is the spiritual king. So they're like two completely separate roles, and the Kagan doesn't get involved in like day-to-day life basically, but like sets really big overarching rules. And if the Kagan makes an announcement on something, the Beck has to listen to him, basically.
So it'd be closer to like a king and then like a duke. I don't know anything about politics anymore, but I'm trying to relate it to somehow that I understand it. I mean, I do kind of get it. I mostly
It's
got it
it's kind
throughout the
of
book
to
anyway.
me, I would say it's more like a shaman and a chieftain, really.
Okay.
Like they're just involved in different levels, and the Kagan isn't in public life. Like he lives on this island in the middle of a river, and you can only see him in very special circumstances. So yeah, so Falak actually doesn't want the position of power for himself, though, if he goes back to where he's from, because he's actually the younger brother, and he says he wants to he wants to rescue his older brother Alp and put him back in power, basically.
Yes, he wants to respect the order of operations
Yes,
that's
because
supposed to happen.
Alp wasn't killed. Alp was taken as a slave by the Northmen, also known
Yeah.
as the Rus, because they're from Russia, I assume.
The what?
The Rus,
Oh,
R-U-S.
yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So Zelikman and Amram are like, okay, we'll try to find your brother. Go to this northern town that was just attacked by the Rus. But basically, the entire plot is just things go sideways all the time.
Yeah, essentially, like, it is very much the epitome of one of those plots where the main characters are like, oh, okay, I guess, since we've been roped into this, we'll take you to this place. And then they take them to that place and they're like, oh, well, I guess that didn't work out. And they're like, maybe we'll just leave. But then Phylax steals their horse and they're like, well,
Yep.
now we have to go after him. And then they go after him. And then it's just a continuation of like stupid things getting them caught up in it. Where it's just like the most basic stuff. So like they chase his horse for a little while because his horse ends up getting taken by other people, and Seligman is like, "I need my horse.
Yep.
Give him back." But that's it. Like he doesn't actually really care about Fulak like at all. He just wants his stupid horse back.
Yeah, because Fulak was also captured at the same time as the horse.
Yes. But it's stuff like that. And they just kind of like, they really just are looking to make a buck every once in a while. They have some morals.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Amram is a little bit more loyal.
And it's partly because he lost his daughter, presumed dead at this point.
Yeah.
But, so I think Fulak brings out kind of the paternal feelings of like, want to take care of this kid, kind of.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but basically what ends up happening is even though Fulak gets kidnapped, he's really good with words. Like, the whole time he's just been, like, cussing Amram and Zelikman out in really creative ways and is just very good at speaking, basically. And kind of accidentally wins over the army that they run into.
Yeah, they just kind of, like, keep running into people, too. Yeah. They, like, just happen to run into characters, and you're just like, oh, I guess we're doing this now. And, like, they're, like, just as apathetic as we are for the most part. It's like, oh, I guess we're doing this now. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yeah, at one point, Zelikman literally is like, I'm just done. Like, I'm going to go my own way. But then he just coincidentally runs into some other Franks and, like, gets kind of filled in on what's going on in his homeland. And I don't know, kind of realizes that what he's doing is selfish and then decides to go back for Amram and Fulak.
Yep, pretty much. And then he does. And that's what happens. I don't know. It's hard to describe the plot. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is a lot of politics and stuff, and I suppose you more of the politics, but I can't because I did not understand most of it. I still did enjoy reading it though. Like it wasn't bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely
interesting.
It wasn't familiar. Did you read the bit at the end where he talked about actually I don't know if it was at the end of the book or if I looked up an interview by him. But he talked about how basically the idea was originally like Jews with swords.
Yeah, that's in the afterword. I started reading that and then I was like, this is really boring, so I walked away from it.
Oh, I thought it was interesting. See,
I did not.
I like to have context for what I read.
I don't. I'm the exact opposite. I prefer not having context. I mean, I guess until after I'm done reading it, in which case this would have been fine, but it was not interesting to me at all to start reading that bit. So I just kind of gave up on it.
I mean, I would agree with what he said though, which was that you don't get a lot of Jewish like warrior characters, you know.
Yeah.
Like go out and fight. Even though obviously the Jewish people had a kingdom in the past, and so had armies.
They had to defend it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I don't have a lot to say about the book overall. I mean, I wrote my review and I just kind of like went back and forth a little bit about some of the issues that I thought it had, which we've already talked about. There's not like a lot of problems in it. There's a lot of really interesting words in it. I had to look up a couple of them.
We had to look up the game of Shantraj.
Yeah, which is just ancient chess.
Yep. And Amram is super good at it. And honestly, that was one of the funniest parts of the book to me is, this isn't really a spoiler, he plays it against Buljan, the guy who stole power from Falak's family.
Yeah.
And Buljan only plays when he thinks he can win, and he loses.
Yeah. Well, he
And then
gets to a point where he's going to lose.
yes. Yeah. No, yeah, he basically gets put in checkmate, is how I understood it.
Yeah.
And then he orders Amram to be drawn and quartered.
Yep.
And that is just so petty and also so what I feel like a ruler of the time would have done. But I was
Yes.
just like, yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And actually, so elephants come up a lot in this book. You know, I said the Mahout is the keeper of the elephants. Well, part of the reason that Buljan overthrew Falak's family is actually because some of their elephants started dying, and people took it as like a bad omen, basically.
Yeah.
And there's actually a really kind of touching moment where Falak gets reunited with an elephant when they make it finally to Atil, the main city where the Buljan is waiting for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I did have a question for you, Corrie.
Okay.
You know, if you were traveling in the Middle East at this time, do you go elephant or camel?
Am I trying to get somewhere quickly?
I mean, neither of them are like super fast, so I don't. Let's say it's a
I
2 day
think
journey.
camels are faster than elephants.
Are they? I really have no idea. When you asked that, they kind of threw me.
Elephants don't really run. Like, they don't, like, move quickly. Like, you can trot a camel. I don't think you can trot an elephant. I think they charge quickly, but I don't think they move fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of short burst type thing.
Yeah. I don't know anything about elephants, so that could be a total lie. This is just my own perception of the animal kingdom. I guess I would choose camels.
You'd go camel?
Yeah.
I don't know. See, but it could be more comfortable to ride an elephant, right? Because can't you have like a big like carriagey type thing on top?
Yeah, you can also fall off and die.
That's technically true of either. So
Okay, but your odds are probably a lot better at dying if you fall off an elephant.
okay. Well, it also seems much more bougie to ride an elephant because
It
you have to
does.
feed them so much.
Yeah,
So
that's
I mean,
true.
I would kind of think elephant personally, but
I don't know. All right, well, we differ.
and then the other question I had for you, because you know the two weapons, the axe and the rapier, are so different. Are you know what would your weapon of choice be if you were in like a historical fiction or a fantasy novel?
I will probably always pick like the sword aspect because I would probably be not good with brute force. If I had to learn how to fight, I would be much better off learning how to be nimble and quick, even though I'm kind of tall.
Yeah,
So, but I think I would still be better off learning that method
you're
than
saying
to
like a
learn how to like use an
one-handed.
axe.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Something that I could have because I would have a better advantage against somebody who's bigger than me. And I would probably maybe not exclusively end up fighting people who are bigger than me, but probably a lot
yeah,
considering I mean, I'm tall for a woman, but I'm not that tall.
yeah.
And I
But
don't have like I wouldn't be capable of like a lot of brute strength, which is what you need for an axe. Even just to swing an
yeah,
axe, you need to be
yes.
pretty strong.
You wouldn't go as like tiny as like Lancet though, right? The rapier, or would you?
Probably not. I guess it would kind of depend because I've never fought with a sword before. So
Yeah,
I don't know. I guess it would depend on how like what I would naturally fall into because I feel like you'd naturally fall in wanting either something really small because then you would Zelikman has to be very precise, but
hmm,
he's also a physician
yeah,
and a surgeon essentially. Like so he can be like that precise. But I would probably be better off with something that's not quite as perfect. You know what I mean?
yeah. A little more room for error.
Yeah, Zelik's weapon is the weapon where he stabs someone to death and they don't realize that they're dead
Hmm.
for like a
Yeah,
couple minutes.
yeah. It's not like
Whereas
chopping
like
them up.
I would want if I was actually fighting people to the death, I would want them to know that they're dead right away. I want them to stop. That's my goal.
Um, I've personally always been drawn more to like daggers, really. I
Yeah.
think. I
So
think it
you'd
would
be
be
like an Assassin's Creed.
yeah, like more like throwing daggers and
Yeah.
a little more deception.
In
Uh,
Fable, my favorite weapon is an axe, but I'm also a brutish man in Fable.
see, yeah,
So,
yeah, that's true. I feel like we're both trying to play to kind of our strengths here.
yeah. I don't know if your strength would be like sneaking though. You're pretty tall. You're taller than me.
I am good at throwing things though.
Okay, that's that's valid. You
That's more where I
still
was
like
going this
do
time.
kind of have to like sneak around a little bit though. You're
That's
talking
right.
like assassinations and stuff.
I don't. Why do you go right to assassinations? I was just saying fighting
Because
in general.
daggers made me think of Assassin's Creed, and you should not fight with daggers. If your opponent has an axe or a sword, you shouldn't be fighting with a
Fine,
dagger.
fine.
I don't
You want me
know
to
if
change?
you need someone to tell you that, but I'm telling you
You want
that.
me to change to archer because that's the other option here.
Okay, fine.
That's more what I lean towards. I would love to be able to fight with a one-handed sword, but I don't personally see it working out for me. So
Really?
yeah,
I would 100% prefer a one-handed sword. You can balance better.
true. I maybe I just like the idea of like having more than one weapon. Maybe that's what it is.
I think that is because I mean I guess if you really like the idea of daggers, you could do like daggers and a short sword.
Mm, yeah.
In Fable, I play with an axe. That's my favorite. But then in Skyrim, I always do ranged attacks. I get my archery up because I hate getting up close to enemies.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah, you take more
always try to
damage.
range.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really does. I guess it does depend on what we need to do. I feel like if I lived in 950 AD, first of all, I'm a woman and I probably wouldn't end up learning a lot of
Hmm.
self-defense. Although I don't know. I feel like they still learned a decent. I feel like they probably learned more than we think they learned.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they went through a lot and they weren't always like helpless maidens. They fought alongside the men as
Yeah.
well, even back then. So, but I would probably pick a sword. Just like not a broadsword, but just like,
Yeah.
something in between a broadsword and like Zelikman's needle sword.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that was all I had for questions. Just I enjoyed the book. I picked it partly because of the cool cover originally. I
You
like
always do things like that.
I'm such an aesthetic
I
person.
pick books based on price, and you pick them based on aesthetics. Don't judge a
Yeah.
book by its cover, Charlotte.
Hey, you know what? In general, I have liked my picks this year though.
That's true, and in general, I have not liked mine.
Which kind of makes sense because if you go with the lowest price point, like
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do look at like, what they're about too.
yeah.
But yeah, I really just go for like cheap books because I'm poor.
Yeah. I mean, there's valid to both. I don't think I overpay for my books, but you know,
No,
I really liked that this, even though it was historical fiction, did feel kind of fantasy-esque.
it does. I think it's because such old historical fiction.
Yeah.
This is like the kind of fighting and stuff that like fantasy novels tend to use.
Yeah.
Like it's so old. It's either medieval or it's like this old.
Yes, exactly. Like
There's not a lot of in between.
so it feels kind of ancient and like even though no one has magical powers, it still is something we would never really see in modern life. So,
Yeah, true. Yeah, I still enjoyed reading it. I definitely liked it. It's just a lot of it did go over my head, I feel like.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
But
I
it
like I
definitely
probably
wasn't bad.
I wouldn't reread this, but it did kind of make me curious about his other books, so that's something.
How many other books does he have? I know he's
A
got a
lot.
short story collection.
And one of them, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, is actually one that Natalie told me to read multiple times.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I'd be kind of. So, someday maybe I'll get around to it.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that, like, you never have enough time to read the books.
No.
Like,
Even though.
I have so many books that I need to read, and I just don't have time. So I stopped. I've tried really hard to stop buying books as often as I used to,
Hmm.
but it's still hard. We still have to, like, get through books.
Yeah, this wasn't even that long of a book.
No, it wasn't. It was actually ridiculously short.
Yeah, I feel like this was a good summer read. That's how I feel about it.
It is. I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this one's gonna be a little bit shorter, I guess, because I don't have anything really more to say about it. I didn't hate it, and I didn't absolutely love it. I thought it was fun to just
Hmm.
kind of go along for the ride, which is how I started to view it. You don't
Yeah.
really like get closure on Seligman and Amram. Like
No.
you just kind of like pop in and you follow them along for this journey, and then they just kind of walk away, and you're like, oh, okay. So yeah, I mean it's an interesting way to write it, because you don't ever really get like their entire backstories, and you
Hmm.
don't get anything about what they're gonna do next. But they just start off as gentlemen of the road. They get caught up in like this mad scheme and a bunch of politics and like a coup and like all this stuff. And then they just kind of go back to being gentlemen of the road. They don't do anything more fancy than that.
Yeah, which I did kind of enjoy because you're right, that is different. It's funny that you say that though, because it's like, well, you never, unless the character literally dies in the book, you never get their whole story, right? But
Yeah, I think that a lot of books are different in that you tend to get like a feeling of one way or the other,
yes,
where
yeah,
like either characters go through something and they come out of something changed, and
mhm,
then you're like, it's either hopeful or it's not. But this is really just like, I don't feel like they necessarily changed that much as characters. We just kind of
no,
like literally just became a fly on the wall for like this portion of their lives, and then we left. And
it's
that's
kind of
it.
like a movie, really.
Yeah, this would make a good movie.
Yeah, it would.
I feel like I would understand it a lot better if I watched it as a movie.
I agree. Yeah, you know what? Someone get the movie rights to this one because this would actually be easy to make into a movie.
Yeah, what? All you have to do is go drop your actors in the middle of a desert
Yeah, and get some
and get an
elephants.
elephant. You don't even need like, I think you only need like 3 elephants. There's
Three
not even that
elephants,
many.
a horse. Well, a lot
Yeah.
of horses.
Yeah, quite a few horses, but not that many elephants. You could get away with probably having one
Yeah, and
and
just
a
dress it up differently.
halfway decent makeup artist to make it look old for the very end. And that's about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
throw some tents up. Let's go make it into a movie, Charlotte.
Okay, that's it. This is how we make our fortune.
Or we lose it. Do we even have a fortune to lose right now? No, neither of us
No,
have that.
that's why I said make it. I was being optimistic.
Okay, well, I'm being realistic. All right, good talk, good discussions, I guess. I don't know. I expected to talk a lot more about this book because I did like it, and you did like it, and
Mhm.
it wasn't a bad book, and it was interesting, and the characters are fun to follow along with, and there's a couple of decent twists in there, and it's very poetic. But I
Yeah,
guess if that's all we have to say about it, then we've already said that.
yeah. No, just I would recommend this if you want to be enveloped into an old timey world for a while.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Next month, we are going to read the book Scythe by, I think it's Neil Schusterman. I legitimately cannot remember. I don't have the book
I
in
don't.
front of
I
me.
don't
Hang on. Let me
know.
Google it. Let me Google it.
Oh, you're googling it now.
I am Googling it right now.
You
Oh
had
my
one job.
gosh. I have to go to somebody's product page. Amazon, don't fail me. My internet's gonna fail me. This is taking forever. Yeah, Neil Schusterman. I was correct. Yeah. So we are going to read that. Next time. That one's a significantly more popular book. I think this will be the most popular book picked up for this so far.
Probably. Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. It is a trilogy, but we're not making any promises on whether we finish or not. Whether we finish trilogies and series is very much determined on how we both feel at the end of the first book.
Yep, because obviously with
Once,
Rune Kings, we did not continue.
correct. Once we get, if we decide to get through like the second book in a trilogy, then we'll usually just finish it.
Yeah.
So if we decide to do that, I didn't bring this up with you before, but I thought about saying that we would just do one like mega podcast about all three. But I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't want to do that. So
I
we'll
don't want to
just
do that
continue
either.
doing one book at a time. This also might not be, if we do choose to continue it, we might not actually read the second book until next year. So
Yeah.
we shall see. But that is our next book club. So tune in next month.
And you could
I
read it
guess.
ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that we're giving, what the next book is at the end of our podcast, you could actually read along with us and then hear our thoughts on it. And then
Yeah.
tell us your thoughts in the comments.
Join our book club.
Join us. Sometimes the books are weird.
Don't judge us.
Someday somebody in the Gentleman of the Road fandom will find us and they'll be like, wow, this is so great. I'm glad that I found two other people who read this book. It's a Pulitzer Prize winning book. Like somebody else read it for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all we have to say about Gentleman of the Road by Michael Chabon. Join us next month for Scythe. And we'll see you all then.
Yeah. Like,
All
comment,
right.
subscribe.
Yeah, do that. All right. Bye.
Bye.